Hey, Chicago Fire and Major League Soccer fans, welcome back to Feed the Fire, a Chicago Fire podcast. I am your host, Nick. We are in episode 48, and we are going to talk a little bit about the gripes with the League's Cup. We're going to talk Chicago Fire and a little MLS free agency, and then we're going to look ahead to the Chicago Fire's next match. Thank you, the regular season is finally back. August 20th at Soldier Field against Orlando City. And we're going to preview some of City's formations, get to know Orlando a little bit, and talk about how the Chicago Fire are going to be able to win this game. Want to remind everyone that the show is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. And also, I want to ask everyone, small favor, no investment, but a couple of clicks. Make sure you rate, you review, you like, you subscribe, you follow, especially on Spotify. If you can follow along there, give us a 5-star review. It'll go a long way in getting this podcast promoted through, the algorithm online, but also helping to grow the conversation around the sport, around the league, and around the hometown club here, the Chicago Fire. So I appreciate all the support and all the views and listens that everyone has given us so far. Let's keep it growing. Now, to get into our real content here, why are we here? We're talking soccer, and we're talking League's Cup. The semifinals are coming up tomorrow night, August 15th, and they look to be some great matches. You have Philadelphia hosting Montreal. You've got the rough and tumble, stingy defense, Philadelphia, against the high-flying finesse offense, Leo Messi and co. of Inter Miami. It's going to be a really good matchup, and it's going to be Miami's biggest test since renewing their entire roster, or essentially signing half of a new starting squad here with Messi, Alba, Busquets, their young DPs, all that sort of thing. So make sure you tune into that one. It's either going to be a rough and tumble match the way Philly wants to play. It's going to be a high-scoring, fun affair the way Miami wants to play. And there's going to be goals. There's going to be highlights. I'm sure of it. Make sure we tune into that one. The other matchup is one I'm really interested to see, and one I really hope to see in Champions League, but I'm glad we're getting it in Liga MX. Monterrey versus Nashville. Monterrey, home team, based on how they finished higher in their table than Nashville did in their table a season ago, but yet being played here in the United States because that's where the tournament's being hosted. Again, a great matchup. Monterrey, the MLS killer. They have knocked out so many MLS teams over the years in CONCACAF Champions League and in other such exhibition matches like League's Cup, so to say. So I'm really anxious to see how they continue their run and how Nashville rises to the challenge of playing this great Mexico club. And I hope Monterrey keeps their head in the game here because keep their head in the game. Did I mention we watched High School Musical with my kids for the first time yesterday? Anyway, I hope Monterrey can keep their head in the game because their coach, as well as many other Liga MX coaches, have been very vocal about their displeasure with League's Cup, the current format. And it centers around several issues. I want to kind of give my take on it here, and then we can dive into our next topic. But the biggest one, and the one where I think they actually have a good argument, is the travel. Some of these clubs are literally traveling cross-continent to get to their games. I think it was the Monterrey coach who said that he had to go play a game in California and then potentially go to Philly, depending on the outcome of some of these other games here. So there is a lot of travel that these Liga MX clubs aren't used to. Now, I think clubs in Mexico travel a bit more than maybe their European league counterparts, but nobody is traveling as much as clubs in Major League Soccer, especially with the interconference play and having teams like Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland having to travel to places like Miami and Philly and DC, right? So I get the travel argument, and I don't know what kind of accommodations they have, if they're flying private, if they're flying commercial coach, or if they're getting, pampered in certain hotels, if they can bring their team chef and some of the other things that you don't want to leave from home, so to say, the niceties of being at home or being back in Mexico. I don't know if they have all of that when they're traveling for these League's Cups games, or if they're going back and forth between Mexico and the United States, because this has been a month-long tournament, and for Monterrey playing every 3 to 5 days for the last 3-4 weeks, like that adds up, and that gets heavy on their legs. And here's the next gripe then, that you're hearing, that it's interfering with their regular season. They're only 3 games into their regular season and then went on a break for Leagues Cup. So that is going to really mess things up if you are a Liga MX team, and especially if you're Monterrey or Tigres, who plan on advancing in this tournament, or other such bigger clubs, better clubs in Mexico, because then you've got your opponents just sitting back home resting for a couple of weeks, getting their tactics right, getting their legs right. It's an early season break, and you are now have 4 or 5 more games on your legs than your opposition. So this is a big adjustment. So I completely understand some of the travel and some of the schedule congestion, extra games type of thing argument from these Liga MX teams. And so I will give them a little bit of credit to those. Some of the other gripes I just think are just ridiculous, and it's just posturing, and it's just complaining for the sake of complaining, or because you lost and you have to complain about something, right? So saying that the refereeing is terrible, or that it's stacked against Liga MX, I think is a terrible argument. The refs are really out of the club's control. And from an MLS perspective, I'm just glad these aren't like your usual CONCACAF Champions League refs. But maybe that's what the Liga MX clubs would prefer, because they can get away with all sorts of games and tricks and dark arts and just hacking, I'll say it, hacking of other players, handling the ball, all the ridiculousness that people hate to see in soccer, which is why a recent study over in England showed that like actual game time in actual playing time, action time, not the stoppage time, not the out of bounds, not kind of the dead ball time, it's maybe about 54 to 60 minutes in the leagues in Europe that they studied. So when you have teams like these Liga MX teams who can get away with all these sort of shenanigans, that really reduces the game time and the action time, and it really just kind of pisses me off as a fan, and I'm sure you guys too. So they are not getting the refereeing breaks that they want. It's always nice when it goes your favor, never when it goes against you. But really, if you look, especially as a Chicago Fire fan, you just got to look at that Club America game to say the Chicago Fire got hosed on a number of calls too. So I think the refereeing is a non-argument here. They're also saying, like a few MLS clubs too, that there's the Messi rules, that nobody can touch Messi, nobody can foul Messi, Messi's got to do everything, whatever. Again, I think this is stupid. Yes, Messi has caught a few breaks during this Leagues Cup run. There is no doubt about that. He's gotten some favorable calls. He's gotten some fouls he's committed that were not called against him. There has been a video going around online that shows when Messi takes a free kick, he actually moves the ball 5 different times and gets it about an entire yard away from where the referee spotted it to give himself a better angle. So he's definitely kind of getting some of those breaks. Now that's the ref and the opposition's fault for like not paying attention. And yeah, the head ref is making sure no one's jostling in the box, making sure the wall's lined up right. But you got VAR, you got 2 guys on the sides, and you've got a 4th official. No one's calling into the head ref saying, hey, Messi's moving the ball around. Well, is anyone, maybe that's where the Messi rules come into effect, or the Messi treatment there. But anyway, I still think the whole Messi thing is not anything that has been rigged against Liga MX teams or against MLS teams. Honestly, it's just an indictment about how bad other strikers in the league have been. If Messi can walk in, and not even playing as a striker, and just do all these things to MLS defenses, people are saying, yeah, that shows how bad the defenses are. No. To me, that shows how bad the rest of the league's offenses are, that they can't be scoring this easily and embarrassing other teams, that there's nobody who can even sniff Messi's boots with the talent or just being able to find space. I'm not saying that they have to take on 3 guys and then rip a shot upper 90. They just can't find space. They just can't get runners into the right spots. They can't play the right pass. That's how bad Messi's making the other league's offenses look, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm digressing. Talked a little bit about that on the last episode. But here's the real rub here now. Here's where I'm going to push back a little bit on all this Liga MX griping here and all this Leagues Cup and anti-Leagues Cup sentiment, right? Liga MX has said, their executives have said, the growth for their league to make more money is in the American markets and to a lesser extent the Canadian markets here, right? They essentially have tapped out their growth potential in Mexico. Now, I still think there's a lot of other things they could do. They probably could have some better marketing, better even just sales and product sales and things of that nature, a lot of the things that we are seeing some of these MLS clubs do. And there's probably always a little bit of room for improvement there. But to really get like new investment, new noticeable cash flow, yeah, they need the American soccer market. Did anyone tell these Mexican teams they're even doing this? Like, that they're even going to play in this League's Cup? It's not even the whole Liga MX either. There's only, I think, 17 of their 20 teams that played, not all 20. So there were a few holdouts. And on top of it, did anyone tell these coaches, like, guys, this is going to bring the money. This is going to pay your salaries. This is going to pay your player transfer fees and salaries. Like, just play. Go out, play to win. Like, stop ripping the tournament that is only going to bring in more money. Maybe it's just because it's their first year and they're not sure how to react to playing in this kind of tournament. This is brand new for every club. But for most Liga MX clubs and for most MLS clubs who haven't played in CONCACAF Champions League or any sort of continental play or other sort of tournament play, I don't know if Liga MX has preseason tournaments. Maybe this is kind of it for them. But we see how many preseason friendlies, and we see, the Carolina Cup and some other Florida Cup with some MLS and USL clubs playing each other. We've got US Open Cup that goes on. MLS clubs are more used to tournament play. I'm not saying they've gotten very good at it, but they've definitely more used to it than what Liga MX teams are. So maybe this is just they don't know what they're doing from an administrative standpoint and a coaching standpoint. And also maybe their jobs are on the line, which is why they're being so vocal. We know how volatile coaching in Mexico can be. You're there maybe a year or two if you're lucky. And so if they're losing to MLS clubs, even in a League's Cup competition that is new and mostly exhibitionist, despite having 3 spots up for CONCACAF Champions Cup on the line and a little bit of prize money too, it wouldn't surprise me if there's an ownership or management group that holds these coaches accountable or might hold it against them just a little bit if they end up losing to some MLS teams or not advancing to the round of 16 in League's Cup. So these are all the things that are going on within Liga MX that I'm speculating on some and other things we've actually heard from that these coaches and this league has to wrap their head around, because right now it's just a bad look. They just look like sore losers to this point. Now, assuming Monterrey wins the whole tournament and they win 2 more games against MLS competition, well, then I'm sure they're going to change their tune and say like, oh, look at how great we are. We're still the kings of CONCACAF, right? But these are the gripes we're hearing now, and that's what I wanted to address. And to push back even more, look at all of Champions League, right? For the last however many years, Champions League has been a tournament before they just changed it this upcoming edition. Mexico has won every single version of it, but for last year when Seattle won it, right? They have won everything. They have dominated Major League Soccer as well as clubs from around the region. Only within the last 5 to 10 years have we really seen Major League Soccer teams competing with and beating Liga MX clubs and not just, squeaking by. They're actually looking a little bit more convincing. So yes, Liga MX, they are still the cream of the crop. Their top 3 or 4 clubs are still the top 3 or 4, but top to bottom as a league, Major League Soccer has looked at Liga MX and said, we need to catch up to them. And they use the struggles and the losses and the lumps and the insults in Champions League to do that. And hopefully, as a soccer fan, we can see Liga MX do the same. But right now, all we're seeing is complaints and gripes. And you know what? Let them keep complaining and griping as long as MLS keeps beating them. That's how I feel. That's all I wanted to say about that. I'm really looking forward to these semifinal games again. I think that Monterrey-Nashville game is going to be a banger. And I think that Miami-Philly game is it's going to have some highlight that everyone's going to be talking about the next day. Our next topic of conversation on the show here, Chicago Fire and free agency. Major League Soccer Players Association put out their list almost a week ago or so of which players are eligible for free agency in Major League Soccer. Now, a little background here, everyone. I don't know how much you know about free agency in MLS, but it's not the nicest topic for everybody. It's been sensitive over years. Matter of fact, free agency didn't even exist when the league started, and it really, when it was technically there, wasn't kind of the iteration we as just general American sports fans think of when we think of free agency. We think of being able to go out and just sign with whoever you want to for as much as you want to. And there's actually a really great video that the MLSPA put out That said, like even Major League Baseball had to go through arbitration for it. NBA players had to sue for it. NFL players had to collectively bargain for it. This is not something that leagues want to allow their players to do. They want control over their players, and especially Major League Soccer as a single entity structure where the clubs are franchises, not separate corporate entities who can do business with each other in a traditional sense. Free agency is not something that the league wanted. In fact, the league thought it would kill the league itself. And if you look in that video, you've got Landon Donovan making comments that when he was making calls on behalf of the Players Association back in 2005 to the league office, they said, we will not discuss free agency. The league will fold before we give you free agency because the league will fold if we give you free agency. So Landon Donovan just went, okay, guys, non-starter. We got to argue and fight for everything else that we can get. So free agency is relatively new for Major League Soccer. And in fact, it kind of started in its first iteration in 2010 when they began a re-entry draft. In 2015, you had a more traditional or more what we think of as a free agency, but you had to be 28 years old with 8 or more years of MLS service. That means you would have had to come into the league at age 20 and only to play your whole time. An 8-year career is an insanely long career for professional athletes. It's very, very rare. Now you're seeing some phenomenally fit athletes in the United States who played soccer who have put that together here in Major League Soccer. But to think of that, if you're a rookie and you're like, man, I got to do this for 8 more years in order to have teams fighting over me in free agency, that is a haul. That is really, really daunting. Fortunately, in 2020 for the players, as free agency was expanded in the latest round of collective bargaining, and now you only have to be 24 years old with 5+ years of MLS service. So again, if you're coming into the league at 19, 20, 21, now you're thinking, okay, I can get my, if I get that one initial contract, maybe get a couple extensions or a couple options, and I'm in the league. By the time I hit 24, 25, 26, and I'm in the prime of my career, I can get paid. Or I might have a little bit more leverage as to where I go, how much I get paid, the kind of environment, other terms to negotiate. So the needle is swung a little bit more central, but there are still a number of restrictions on these players. Like we said, 24 years old, 5+ years in MLS service. Now, if you're a college player, or if you were a guy in USL for a couple years and then is coming into the league, then you will be a free agent probably when you're 27, 28, 29, if not later in your 30s. Then you're going to making sure that you get that free agent contract. From the team side of things, though, there is no cap on the number of free agents a team can sign and no exclusion based on salary. Now, let's take a look at some of the free agents on the Chicago Fire. They have 4 free agents at the end of this year. Fabian Herbers, Wyatt Omsberg, Spencer Richey. Those 3 are on club options. So if the club picks up their option, great. If not, they're free agents. And then Kai Kamara is just out of contract at the end of the season. Me personally, I would be okay if the club let all 4 of these guys walk, with the exception of Wyatt Omsberg. He's kind of become a favorite of mine on a personal level. I just think the guy has just worked his tail off. Not to say nobody else has, but just watching him grow and develop over the last 2 years, I really think he needs another chance. I don't think Klopas and co are giving him much of a shot. Not that I know his injuries, but I just don't think they're giving him the opportunities. He's playing too much with Fire 2. This is a guy who started at least half a season last year at a high level, and they're putting him with Fire 2 squad. Come on, he needs to be in Major League Soccer. Anyway, I digress about Wyatt Omsberg there. But really, if all these guys ended up walking, I wouldn't be too, or if the club lets all these guys walk, I wouldn't be too broken up about it. But here's the reality, though. The Fire need a new GM. And most of the discussion about free agents, who's going to stay, who's going to go, is really moot until we get the new GM in and we know his philosophy or her philosophy and how they want to take the team. Additionally, we still need a new coach. Frank Klopas is the interim manager. And he has said he doesn't want to be the head coach. And the Fire have not really suggested that they want him to be the head coach. They were really going after Jesse Marsch for a long period of time. There's rumors about Kostenoglu from Greece, the former AEK Athens coach coming over, right? So the team really hasn't said, yeah, we want Frank Klopas. to be the head coach. And guys, we've all seen this. We've all seen Frank Lopez as the head coach. Don't forget who has been the one person that has been a part of this organization for the last decade. It's been Frank Lopez. Head coaches have come and gone. Assistants have come and gone. Players, owners, managers have, office managers, GMs have come and gone. And the Fire have sucked for a decade. So I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, like, we need to get a new person on that bench before we can start really having full, meaningful conversations about free agency. But hey, it's a podcast. Let's dive into it as best as we can. Now, looking at Fabian Herbers, again, when the Fire, I've said it before, I'll say it again. If the Fire are ready to start competing for trophies, I don't think Fabian Herbers has a meaningful role on the team. I think he, at best, is going to be a utility player on a top 4 or 5 Eastern Conference team. But given where the Chicago Fire's roster is, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And again, I'd prefer him to move on, but if he's still on the squad next year, it's because they are building and filling in other pieces and that they can use him as kind of this utility player who can play central defensive midfielder if needed, who can play on the wing if needed, who can, I bet they would throw him as an outside back if the Esteves loan doesn't work out, and if Suke, not Suke, if the Dean deal is over, whatever the case may be. So he's a utility guy. He's got use. He's got value. Depending on how they negotiate his contract, that could be whether he comes back or not. As far as Wyatt Omsberg, I've made it known I really like the guy, and I think you need to keep some depth at center back. You have Chihos, you have Tehran. Chihos, another year older. You have Tehran, who at one point was speculated to be going to Europe as that next guy from the Chicago Fire who could make a move, just because of how big and how physical he is. He was playing a little bit with Colombia's senior team, I believe, and he might be, might be a guy that a team in Europe could think that he is a guy that could fit in and develop a little bit more and maybe get at a bargain from the Chicago Fire. So I think having Wyatt Omsberg there, along with keeping Mauricio Pineda, we saw earlier he got his contract extension, is just smart depth move at the center back. I don't think Kendall Burks is a guy who can cut it at the MLS level. At least he hasn't shown it in his couple of seasons where he's gotten his starts. Maybe he needs more time with CF2 to develop, get bigger, get stronger, get smarter, get more tactical. And, he's still a young guy. I mean, you don't have to give up on him yet, but he hasn't shown it yet. So I would hope Omsberg stays to keep some of that center back depth. Spencer Richey has been an excellent pickup by the Chicago Fire, able to mentor Chris Brady, if not in the actual goalkeeping, but on being a professional and being a professional in Major League Soccer. Solid starter when he is called upon, and I think he would be an excellent player to keep on the squad. Now, him as a free agent, goalies are in an interesting position, both figuratively and literally with soccer, right? It's an interesting position because we've seen in Major League Soccer that an American goalie is a great asset to have because you're not burning an international spot on a goalkeeper who you can find good American keepers, right, and get good value here. So if Spencer Richey, he's one guy who could probably negotiate himself a better contract, maybe get some more minutes and playing time if that's what he desires at this point in his career. But I would love to see him stay with the Chicago Fire for the reasons I said before. Now, Kai Kamara, whatever your feelings are towards Kai, I don't see him coming back at all next year. And it's not a shot against Kai. I think it's because whoever the new GM is going to have a DP spot. And the rumors are they're going to add a 4th DP spot. So we'll have 2 DP spots. And then we know the Doumbia signing is only a temporary DP just for the season. So the next GM is going to have 3 designated player spots possibly to work with, as well as a couple under 22 spots if they move on from Jairo Torres. That means they're going to sign a striker. One of those has to be a starting striker. That's the biggest need for the Chicago Fire, a consistent goal scoring threat and consistent offensive generation. And if you have a starting striker, a DP caliber striker, heck, go get 2 of them. Because if you miss on one, because we know the Chicago Fire have had trouble with DPs, then you'll have the second one there, and you've got Koutsias who can be the backup and continue to grow and develop, maybe have a few breakout games and then get sold for a profit. Or when you move on from your current DP, you can slot Koutsias in. So I just don't see Kai having a role on this squad next season. As much as you love him, as much as you love his game, or as little as you want him on your squad, wherever you fall on the spectrum, I just don't see him having a spot because whoever the new GM is going to go out and sign a couple of strikers, no doubt about it. Looking around MLS, though, there were a few free agents that kind of were intriguing to me. And I'm looking more at defense here because, again, you sign offense and you grow defense. And so in this sense, instead of a homegrown or an academy kid, we're looking at other players from within MLS. So I was looking for free agent Major League Soccer defenders who are in their 20s. There are a lot of guys who are in their 30s, and I just think that is not how you want to sign, especially if you want to use some wingbacks and have them pushing forward. You don't want guys in your 30s. They're not going to be able to cut it the entire season, especially when the league's getting younger and better on offense. So here are a few names that I saw that are on the list that might be intriguing. First of all, Andrew Gutman of Colorado, left back. First of all, we all know, well, if you don't, look it up. Andrew Gutman's history with the Chicago Fire was with one of their academy affiliates in Indiana, then went to play for Cincinnati, but couldn't sign then with when they were in USL, but then couldn't sign with the Fire for one reason or other. I forget the nuance of it. Then he ended up going to Celtic in Scotland and then coming back to Red Bull, bounced to Atlanta, had a couple good seasons with Atlanta, scoring some goals, helping out there, and then is now with Colorado. I think he would fit, one, just to kind of have him come full circle here with Chicago, but also he can play wing back. He knows the league. He's a competent defender, and I think he would be good for him to play with Chris Mueller a little bit when Mueller is back from his season-ending injury. I think that would be a great combination to have up the left-hand side. Diego Palacios. Oh, and Gutman's only 26 years old, by the way. Now, Diego Palacios of LAFC, 24 years old, also a left back. And hey, I'm not trying to take shots at Miggy Navarro here. My first two guys here that I saw are left backs here. But we all know that Miggy's not exactly locked in as a long-term starter here, just given his lack of offensive production in a system that needs the wingbacks to push forward and contribute, as well as some of his availability with yellow cards and red cards and just his general hot-headedness. We'll see what the coach wants out of that player. But yeah, Diego Palacios, left back, 24 years old. So he could command a decent salary being a free agent and only 24 years old. Maybe the Fire bring him in on a 2-year deal with an option or a 3-year deal with an option, and then they have some control if they want to move on for him or keep him and lock down that left back position. But he's got that LAFC pedigree, and I think that would really help bringing some winning and championship caliber play into the locker room. Kyle Duncan of Red Bulls, right back, 26-year-old. We all know that Red Bulls, this would kind of be a tough one because we all know Red Bulls really likes to use their system that, as they call it, energy drink soccer. I almost, feel so weird repeating it over and over. But that kind of high energy would be great to bring the Chicago Fire, who lately, at least over the last several seasons, have been looking to counterattack a lot more, to launch Gutierrez forward, to get the ball to Kutsias, to play the balls up the wings. I think that it would be it might be worth taking a look at Kyle Duncan a little closer. And then lastly, Kai Wagner of the Union, left back, who has been an integral part of one of the best clubs over the last several seasons here. The Philadelphia Union's defense has been historic a couple of years ago. It has been both in goals allowed and goals scored. He's been contributing. He's getting forward. There was rumors he was going to a Big Five league, for a top club over the last couple of years, but it's never materialized. So if the Fire can somehow get in for Kai Wagner, 26-year-old outside back, I think it would be a huge get for the Fire. If the Union, they might want to move off of some of their bigger names here who they might not want to pay themselves and bring up their next big thing if they're ready to kind of reset and reload a bit. So we could get, I think there's going to be teams who make some real serious offers, and there's some real serious speculation around Kai Wagner this offseason. As a little quick tidbit here before we get into our Orlando City preview, also MLS listed their 22 under 22. Their writer Matt Doyle put his young players out there, and since we're kind of talking about compliments to Gutierrez and Brady, let's talk about those two as making the 22 under 22 list as of right now. And let me remind you, we're talking about current play. This is not some sort of MLB style prospect list. I mentioned this to my 7-year-old son. Like, oh yeah, here's the 22 under 22. He's like, where's Koutsias? Koutsias is under 22. Why is he on the list? It's not a prospect list, son. This is how they're playing right now. And Gutierrez and Brady are 22 of the best young players in MLS right now. So here's what Matt Doyle said about Brian Gutierrez. Quote, "The Fire are finally taking advantage of all the talent in their backyard, with Gutierrez this year's standout. No offense to goalkeeper Chris Brady, who we'll talk about in a bit. He is not a classic number 10 who makes the game at his feet, but more of an all-purpose attacker who gets the ball off his foot quickly and makes absolutely killer passes on the move, arguably a more important skill in today's game than the ability to dictate tempo. 2 more assists will make him one of the youngest players in league history to hit 10 on the season. Needs to work on, and he's got 1 goal to go with it." Yeah, so as Doyle points out, almost 10 assists, but only 1 goal to go with it. And I mostly agree here. He needs to work on quicker decision making and finishing. He needs to definitely get the ball off his feet into dangerous attacking areas as quickly as possible. And yeah, work on his shooting. Find the back of the net. Don't look for dancing in the box. Rip one from 20 yards out if you can, Guti. Now, looking at Chris Brady, here is what Matt Doyle of MLSsoccer.com said about Chris Brady making the 22 under 22 list. Quote, "Brady had a couple of howlers early in the season, but since then, the 19-year-old has been one of the very best goalkeepers in Major League Soccer. As per American Soccer Analysis's all-in-one goals added stat, Brady is at plus 0.17 per 90 this year. That's 5th in the league, and that matches the eye test. For reference, Gaga Slonina's number last season was minus 0.02. The Fire Academy's done it again, folks. Needs to work on. This kid just needs reps." End quote from Matt Doyle. I agree with this. I think Brady has been an excellent goalkeeper, and but for his stellar play, the Fire are not making the playoffs, are not above the playoff line right now. He has saved them several points this season with some of his late game heroics or some of his early game awareness when the defense hadn't woken up and realized the referee blew the whistle and he's had to make some early saves. And I absolutely agree. When you're a goalkeeper, when you're a 19-year-old pro, it's crazy to say that, right? 19-year-old professional, he just needs more reps. Just keep doing what he's doing. Get more reps, face more circumstances, see more scenarios, see more players, see more styles, and then learn and grow from it. I love that Chris Brady is on this list, and I love that they're including goalkeepers in general on this list. At this point in the show, let me quickly give you our sponsors information. Remember, Skira Icelandic Spring Water is sponsoring Feed the Fire, available at your local 7-Eleven. Skira is Icelandic for clear, and the water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This is not your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it is one of the best. And as we move on to the second half of our show, we're going to look at the Chicago Fire's next match, their August 20th home game against Orlando City. Thank you, regular season is back. No more Leagues Cup. No more waiting for the teams that had been knocked out. And by the way, I'm going to the game. This is the first time I'm getting out to a Chicago Fire game in person this season. I'm so sorry to say that. It's taken me till mid-August to do that. But I'm taking my son. We're meeting a friend and his son. We're going to be out in section 142. So if you're out, message me on Twitter at Glasshouse Soccer or email me glasshousesoccer@gmail.com. And yeah, come say hi. Let me know that you listen to the show. I'll get a quote from you and we'll put it in the next episode. Let me know what you want to say, or just in general, reach out and let me know what you want to hear in the show. But yep, I'm excited to be there. I'm excited to see this matchup between two currently in the playoff picture teams. Orlando sitting in 5th place on 37 points, 10 wins, 6 losses, and 7 draws, whereas the Fire, a few spots below them in 8th place on 32 points, 8 wins, 7 losses, and 8 draws. Now, I went on to fbref.com, pulled up Major League Soccer and all of the kind of stats for all the teams, the offense, the defense, the goalkeeping, the miscellaneous, everything like that. And then I would filter by goals, assists, these offensive categories, by tackles, interceptions, save percentages, all these defensive categories. And I would look to see where Orlando City would fall. And my general impression, just kind of looking at where they are relative to the rest of the league, is Orlando City's a slightly above average offensive team that does everything else decent. They don't hurt themselves. They're not picking up yellows and reds. They're not conceding penalties. They're not shooting themselves in the foot, own goals, or silly fouls, or giving up things early, giving up a lot of goals. They don't hurt themselves, but they just haven't had, say, the talent to really sustain being in the top 4 in the Eastern Conference. Part of that is goal scoring, but they are 3rd in MLS in total assists. And if I remember, they were about 7 more assists than expected assists on the season. Other than that, again, nothing really stood out. They seem to be a slightly above average offensive team, and they do everything else fairly well. They play a 4-2-3-1 formation, and the Fire fans should be familiar with this. Over their last 5 matches, they have used the same starting lineup with one exception. Martin Ojeda started a match for Mauricio Pereira, but that's the one starting change in their last 5 matches. So let's run down the typical starting lineup here. Pedro Gallese in goal. The back line from left to right, Rafael Santos, Robert Janssen, Antonio Carlos, and Kyle Smith. They have Cesar Araujo and Wilder Cartagena as their defensive midfielders, Ivan Angulo, Mauricio Pereira, and Facundo Torres as your attacking midfielders. I do want to take this time to let you know that we are having some technical difficulties with the StreamYard feed and recording, so I do apologize if there have been any gaps or breaks in my voice and in my speaking throughout. Getting back to Orlando City's starting lineups, when they actually do make the substitutions, usually you see Ramiro Enrique and Ersan Kara come in. Ersan Kara, striker, forward, Enrique, kind of an attacking player, winger. Those two have been subbed in 4 of the last 5 games as well. So you're going to see those guys coming in for an injection of offense in the second half, or to keep the pressure up when playing with the league. And I do like that kind of approach from Orlando City. So how do the Fire beat a team where you've got a really good goalkeeper in Gallese, when you've got a great center back in Robert Janssen, when you have solid defensive mids in Araujo and Cartagena, when you have a player like Facundo Torres who went off against the Chicago Fire in their last meeting, a 3-1 beatdown of the Fire on July 1st, Facundo Torres was the best player on the pitch by miles during that game. And if you go back to SofaScore, I think he was he was given an 8.5 in that game. And the Fire couldn't score to save their lives. I think Shaqiri converted a PK on that one. Then again, so did Torres. But Gutierrez had a really good game, creating opportunities, but nobody could work with him, find the back of the net, get into a good spot. So how are you going to do this? Especially Duncan McGuire, one of the best young players. I think if they still had Rookie of the Year, he might be the runaway favorite for it. I know our good friend of the show, John Donovan, has texted me and called me and talked to me about how well he's liking to see Duncan McGuire, and that he is a complete striker. Just got to get better because he's younger, but he's got the whole package. But yeah, MLS doesn't do Rookie of the Year anymore. They do Young Player of the Year, kind of more, as people have said, more in tune with soccer culture, and not having rookies, and how having, like a Diego Rossi competing against a guy who was playing in college last year for Rookie of the Year, kind of a thing. But yes, how are the Fire gonna beat a solid Orlando City team who smoked them down in Orlando about 6 weeks ago? First, stop the counter attack. The Fire are going to need a great game out of DP Ousmane Doumbia. He's been here now. He's trained with the team. He's had a couple Liga MX, Leagues Cup games to get under his belt. He needs to have a big performance here. Heck, I don't know if they could have him man mark Facundo Torres. I don't know if any team would want to have someone shadowing him like that or spying him like that. But he needs to have a good game because we can see that Orlando can generate a lot of quick and efficient and effective offense on the counterattack. They did it last time. Also, on the offensive side of the ball, the Fire need to convert some first half chances. They leave too many points on the board. Crazy thing is the Fire have scored 28 goals and their XG on the season is 25.1. So technically they're outperforming their XG. But the problem is they're not actually generating any XG, right? The Fire have played 23 games and are generating about a goal a game in expected goal scoring here. They need to generate more offensive chances here, right? So the issue isn't that they're outperforming this, that they're not outperforming the stat. They are. The issue is the stat in and of itself is so low because they're not creating any offense. They need to create offense and score a first half goal. I know you could say that for every team, but it's an especially troubling moment, especially troubling issue for the Chicago Fire, especially if Klopas wants to put in Shabilko in the second half to try and salvage something, because we've seen how that goes. Chris Brady's going to have another good game. And also, don't give in to emotions. It's been 2 weeks since these teams have last played, over 2 weeks. Keep your heads right. Keep your heads in the game. And we saw Orlando City has brought back fan favorite Junior Urso. Don't let him get under your skin late in the game, and don't let him take advantage of any opportunities. BetMGM currently has Chicago at plus 125. Again, we're about a week out, so these numbers will change. Chicago's 120 plus 125 right now. The draw is at plus 240, and Orlando City is at plus 195. So Chicago, the slight favorites, the home team, so you expect that. Plus coming in, winning 5 of their last 6, but can you really look at recent run of form, especially after Leagues Cup? I don't think you can. I think it's going to be a slow start because of the 2-week layoff, but there's going to be a lot of late game action here because players are going to have the legs. They're going to be rested and ready to go. But I still think Orlando City is the better offensive team until the Chicago Fire can prove me wrong. So I'm going to predict a 3-2 victory, and I hate to predict the Fire lose when I'm going to be at the game, but please, universe, prove me wrong. Let me see a little something. Let my son have a great game this summer so that he can enjoy it and talk about going to see a Chicago Fire win. Last year, we saw him beat DC. This year, hopefully, we can see him repeat and beat Orlando City. Real quick, speaking of DC, quick transfer update and news. Taxi Fountas, the striker for DC, and the club have mutually terminated contract. He's been on leave since July 21st for allegations of a racial slur versus a teammate. And as we know, he was also subject to an investigation into using a racial slur against an Inter Miami player last year. And again, in all these situations, the league has found the allegations to be credible, but not substantiated. So essentially, we believe you, or we have no reason to not believe you, Mr. Accuser, but we just don't have the evidence to prove that it actually happened. So, kind of little technicalities in there, but they've mutually terminated his contract. I'm upset, number one, because I'm Greek, and I love being able to point to my young soccer player Greek son saying, there's a striker, emulate his game. It's kind of embarrassing. It's a lot of embarrassing the way he went out, especially when he could have been a really good striker. He had 18 goals and 4 assists in 38 appearances for DC United. And had he not had all these other issues, I'm betting that number would have gone up. He was never afraid to shoot, made good runs, even off the ball. And I remember that game last season at Soldier Field. How is like 5'9" Taxi Fountas winning headers in the box? He almost scored off of a header too. So he was a really, really good striker, could have been a really good player for the league, but obviously the off-the-field issues did him in. And also to point out, New York City have re-signed Maxi Morales. He had been back with Racing, I believe, in Argentina, and now he's coming back to New York City. 36 years old, still knows how to get it done, though. He signed through the 2024 season. The maestro in the midfield is back. The playmaker New York City has been missing since, Maxi Morales himself left. And with that, Chicago Fire fans, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. You're looking forward to the game. Enjoy Leagues Cup, all it has to offer. And when Orlando rolls into town, I'll see you in section 142. Let's go Fire.